not just the book Beloved by Toni Morrison. A whole lot of other books on race or gender are now getting targeted by conservative parents and elected officials. Another Toni Morrison book, The Bluest Eye, which is like one of my favorites of all time, Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, Fences by August Wilson. Fences? You guys, seriously? Have you ever read Fences? They're all in the crosshairs. And it almost seems like some conservatives are in a race to one-up each other. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has ordered a criminal probe of, quote, pornography in schools. I guess he's done finding all the rapists that were in Texas. Remember, he was going to do that? And that comes after another Republican lawmaker in Texas drew up a list of 850 books, 850, that he says could make students, quote, uncomfortable. And surprise, surprise, most of them are about race or sexuality. But hey, school board member in Virginia one-upped that gentleman and has got them both beat. The comment I'm about to play, it actually happened during a discussion about the book 33 Snowfish, which is about homeless teenagers attempting to escape from pasts that include sexual abuse. So just watch this.
I guess we live in a world now that our public schools would rather have kids read about gay pornography than Christ. I think those books, I don't want to even see them. Like, I think they should be thrown in a fire.
Okay, so this is nothing new. We've heard of book burning before. We've heard of censorship of information or even stories that can be taught to children just about society in general. Anyway, this is a bunch of conservative groups that are coming after any and everything that they could deem being harmful or uncomfortable for other folks to read that maybe have no connection to it, no knowledge of background, or even anything to do with the message that is being sent in these books. They just see certain titles, they see certain authors, and they see certain skin tones, and they think this is a disaster for us. What makes me more uncomfortable is learning about someone else and actually changing the way I approach my life based off of that. That is really the main issue. But back to that 850 books that, the list of 850 books that are supposed to be banned in these schools. From The Guardian, they point out that the Texas Tribune reported that the books included 2 by Ta-Nehisi Coates, LGBT Families by Leanne K. Curry McGee, and Pink is a Girl Color, and Other Silly Things People Say, a children's book by Stacey and Eric Dragset. Krause's list sparked panic in schools, and by December, a district in San Antonio said it was reviewing 414 titles in its libraries. They're reviewing all these books to try and determine whether or not they're gonna take them out because these groups are afraid of discomfort. That's part of learning. That's part of getting outside of your bubble. When you have to break a bubble and actually experience other things, you get a little uncomfortable, especially when we're based off the history and current, by the way, current policies and attitudes towards certain people that are always deemed as the other. It's uncomfortable to come out of that. It's uncomfortable to leave that shell and say, you know what? I see where you're coming from, and maybe I'll change the way I approach this, and maybe we'll have a better society. These things, instead of being insular and worried about how it's gonna hurt your feelings and your children might learn something about their country and what has happened in the past, it's just close our eyes, plug our ears, and shake our heads. That sounds like children to me.
I agree with you 100%. And the fact of the matter is, if the goal is to try to make sure that we don't have kids who are uncomfortable in school, then maybe we should just ban school, right? Because last time I checked, most teenagers are generally uncomfortable throughout their entire teenage years. So that's the point. You learn, you experience things that may be a little bit, as you said, out of your comfort zone. And the other thing that's so ridiculous about this, I guarantee that for most kids, they're looking at these 850 titles, and maybe we should give credit to some of these Republicans, because I guarantee some of these kids are saying, I'm gonna read this book, and I'm gonna read that book, and I'm gonna read this book. I mean, these books are gonna be more popular than they've ever been because a bunch of dim-witted Republicans who don't know anything about teenagers are saying we got to ban these books.
Or even elementary age kids. Honestly, kids are smarter than we're giving them credit for, especially with the age of information that we're comparing ourselves to when we're 10 years old. And in order to find out some information on things, we had to open the Encyclopedia Britannica and flip through a million pages and go, how am I gonna find this one article about the bladder so I can write my school report? I've done that specifically. I remember that from like 4th grade, maybe 6th.
The bladder.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, I don't know where to find this information. Kids have more information of things and they're curious about these things. And if you keep thinking you're banning these books and they're suddenly not gonna learn about why you wanna ban these books, they're gonna turn on you the way you think they're gonna turn on you for having information. They might appreciate you for doing these things. By the way, with that in mind, let's go to this next graphic really fast because this is also in Pennsylvania. The Central York School Board banned a long list of books, almost entirely titles by or about people of color, including books by Jacqueline Woodson, Ijeoma Oluo, Ibrahim X. Kendi, and children's titles about Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr. Let's call it what it is. Every author that is on that list is a black voice, is what one teacher told the York Dispatch. And that ban was overturned because students protested in September of last year because they know they're not stupid. So this discomfort that they've been talking about is within themselves. It has nothing to do with the students that they're putting that on or giving the excuse for why they don't want people to learn and advance and progress in this country. I'm not sure how much more it's gonna work, but think about it this way. I'm sure there's plenty of people of color, there's plenty of parents that see the curriculum, my wife definitely thinks this way, that see the curriculum that happens in schools and wants them to change the way they do things, wants them to teach more about inclusivity and diversity. Are they changing laws and banning certain things and burning books in order to accommodate those parents? They're not doing that because they're not looking out for parents. They're looking out there for their political agenda. This is another addition to the list of things that's supposed to be in this culture war that they're fighting, that they're supposed to be running in 2022 on and probably 24 on, because there's no policy. What is this really going to do? If the books that have been in these schools this whole time and haven't destroyed people's lives yet, now it's gonna be a problem because someone said CRT, which they can't define, which if they do define it, they'll point out that we just kind of don't want the full history to be taught. Because I learned very little about slavery growing up. It's because the books weren't teaching us the real history. Shouldn't I be upset about that? Shouldn't I want those censored books banned? Nobody's listening to me though. Wonder why. So
well, this also underscores the stunning maybe not so stunning, but the hypocrisy among Republicans and conservatives on this. Because it was not that long ago when conservatives said, "Oh, shame on Hillary Clinton for saying it takes a village to raise a child," because they wanted to say, "No, it's up to families, it's up to parents to decide." And yet here they are. I mean, the way to deal with this is parents take responsibility. You know what your kids are reading, or you inquire, and then it's up to your family, to your parents to decide, okay, yeah, that's fine, or no, I don't think you should read that book, or I want you to read this other book. But the idea that outsiders, people outside of your family would say, no, keep these books, particularly if they're from African-American authors, out of the school, first of all, that's racism, but secondly, we should always err on the side of give these kids more and let the parents and let the families decide where to winnow it down. It shouldn't be up to people who don't know anything about you or your kids or your family or even your school for that matter.
There's one more part of this. There's a group called No Left Turn, and they got 3 categories. I want you to hear these 3 categories that are the problem that are a problem with what kids might learn. These things are things that expose indoctrination, so critical race theory, anti-police, and comprehensive sexuality education. I think we know what the comprehensive sexuality education is that they have a problem with, but anti-police and critical race theory, again, they're gonna have to expand on this because look at this list of some of the things that they're banning, some of the things I mentioned earlier, but this is what's on the list of the banned things and the horrible things that kids are gonna learn about. Critical race theory, A is for activists. Anti-racist baby, because that's a problem. I think I'd rather the book Racist Baby to be in my children's classrooms. It doesn't have to be a us versus them, but it's helpful when it is. And that's why it is. I'm ready to move on. I'm tired of these folks.